Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the first webinar of the Fall 2023 series presented by Newton Conservators. My name is Beth Wilkinson, and I'll be your host for the evening. And Nissa Patton is our technical director tonight. Newton Conservators is an all-volunteer nonprofit established in 1961 that connects people to open space and that works to preserve and maintain the open spaces in Newton. We are grateful for the beauty and sustenance that the land provides for humans and the other creatures with whom we share the earth. We acknowledge the Massachusetts stewardship of this land that kept its ecological communities vibrant, strong, and interconnected for thousands of years, and we hope to work with them as we strive to maintain and restore our open spaces. Tonight's webinar is by Jon Regosin, who is the former Deputy Director of the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and is a returning board member of Newton Conservators. Tonight, Jon will explain how to use iNaturalist to identify the species of plants and animals that you find in our open spaces, and how you can help Jon and Newton Conservators to create an up-to-date inventory of Newton's conservation areas. More about that at the end. But for now, we are really fortunate to have Jon share his knowledge with us. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm really excited to be here. I think people that know me well, my family and friends, will tell you I'm a big fan of iNaturalist, and I enjoy talking about iNaturalist as well. So, and the reason I'm really a fan of iNaturalist is because since I've been using it, it's really helped me improve my plant identification skills. And even more so, like, I really didn't know much about insects. I got very interested in bees and wasps, and it's dramatically, it's a big help to me in terms of learning. So we can use iNaturalist to answer questions like what plants and animals occur in Newton or in my local park or really anywhere. So for example, if I'm planning a trip, where should I go to see bees in Seattle? In fact, the pictures on the side are some bees. I went to visit a friend of mine in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and before I went, I looked at iNaturalist to see which interesting bees I might be able to find in the area, and I was able to go and look for them when I got there. As I mentioned, how can I improve my identification skills, whether it's birds, insects, bees, aquatic invertebrates, whatever you're interested in. When is the best time to see something like a mining bee in Newton? And then what's the range of some of these species that we might see in Newton? And then lastly here, we can ask questions like, can we build a community? You know, Beth mentioned this at the beginning to, for example, help us better detect emerging invasive plants here in our community, or to inventory native plants and animals. So I'm going to talk about, what is iNaturalist, what we can do with it, and then I'm going to have a bunch of slides that are essentially like a tutorial for how to use it on our phones. And hopefully through that, you'll see why it's awesome and a lot of fun to use. So some background, iNaturalist was launched in 2008. There are over 3 million users, over 156 million observations, and hundreds of thousands of people using it every month. Until very recently, it was a project of National Geographic and a nonprofit natural history museum in California. Now it's become its own nonprofit organization. So what is iNaturalist? It's a place to record and explore nature findings. And it's really also a community resource to learn about biodiversity and identification. And this is sort of a vision statement on the iNaturalist website. I'll read it. Through connecting different perceptions and expertise of the natural world. And that means there's a diversity of different kinds of people that are using it. iNaturalist hopes to create extensive community awareness of local biodiversity and promote further exploration of local environments. So this is sort of how I'm thinking of iNaturalist, these four components: observe, identify, explore, and then connect. So I'll give a brief introduction, and I'm going to launch right into actually showing you the website. So observe, it's all about observations. And observation is what you saw, obviously, but it's also associated information. It's when you saw the plant, where you saw it, what evidence, and evidence is really important. We're going to get into that as we go on, and then who you are. That's what makes an observation. And iNaturalist is really an observational geodatabase. It's a database that's spatially referenced because we're capturing the locations. And one important note, iNaturalist doesn't track search effort. There are other apps, like a birding app that does that. This is important for scientists because it doesn't tell us how much time we're spending surveying an area or what area we looked, how big the area was that we might have looked when we found something. So that's a drawback, but on the other hand, it's a very powerful observational database. So identify, I covered observe. Now identify, there are basically two methods of identification in iNaturalist. The first one is a computer, they call it a computer vision model. This is machine learning. The app will make recommendations for you based on a computer algorithm, which is based on millions of photographs. The second way that we use iNaturalist to identify things is through crowdsourcing, meaning other users and experts can go in and identify observations. So a little more on the crowdsourcing. An observation becomes what we call research grade if there's a 2/3 consensus. So at least two. So in this example here, you'll see that two people, Naturalist 2073, by the way, have agreed. So that's more than 2/3. So that's called research grade. And that's important. You know, we really want our observations corroborated by others. Whoops. Then explore, I'm going to show this live in the actual website, but for example, we can explore what species might be occurring near us in Newton. We might ask a question like, what species of bumblebees are there in Newton? There are actually 4 that have been observed on iNaturalist. And you can see the number of observations there as well. And then you can delve deeper. So like if I select the perplexing bumblebee, which is the rarer of those 4, I can access all sorts of natural history information, a range map. I can learn about that species. So connect, it's really a community, iNaturalist. And for example, you can comment on other people's observations. You can also help them identify, but let's say you have a question or there's a need to go back and forth, so you can comment. You can also message other people through the app. By the way, I put my tagline here, and I've tagged people in this comment section. Like if I've asked the state botanist, Bob Wernerell, can you help me identify something? So feel free to tag me if you're interested on some of your observations. I can give you my opinion. And it's also a community because there are projects, and we have set up one here in Newton that involves surveying our natural areas, and you can join iNaturalist projects. The community was actually written about in the New York Times because it's essentially a form of social media. And we all know that sometimes there's uncivil discourse on social media. This was held up as a model for civil discourse where people are collaborating and working together to identify things in the New York Times. So I think I'm going to now launch into actually looking at the website with you. But so when you first get onto the website, you'll see there's a login. If you don't already have an account, you'll be asked to, and then it's going to bring you to your home screen. And I just want to point out one thing. If you scroll down on this home screen, this is another screenshot. There's a getting started guide on the right. Hopefully, for those of you who aren't familiar with iNaturalist, hopefully I'm helping you get started, but there's a whole bunch of resources over here in the getting started on the website. So with that, I'm going to switch over to the actual website. So this is my home screen. Again, I'm Naturalist 2073. And I'm going to go through some of the, right now I'm on my home screen and I can see some activity. Like this is something I posted today, and someone named Catherine has already helped me to identify it. There's my history there, some other information. So now I'm going to, this is my profile, some statistics about me. I don't have much in there. Observations. I'm going to come back to this, but I just want to show you what's available to you under your profile. Identification. So this is really important. Identifying other people's observations, and the whole community kind of depends on people doing that for what they're comfortable with, for things that they feel they are capable of identifying. So this is my history of identifications. I can edit my observations here. Now I'm going to go to the main menu. I'm going to start with explore. So now I'm exploring everyone's observations, and I'm exploring them worldwide. So like I said, there's about 157 million observations. So now we're going to want to filter. So let's type in Newton, Massachusetts. So now we're only observing the observations in Newton. And there's three, we can see them different ways. So now obviously there's a lot fewer observations. I can see them on a map. I can zoom in and out. I can see them on a list. Let's say I'm interested in Cold Spring Park. That's not an accurate map, but over here, Cold Spring Park has been, I'm not going to go into this too much, but Cold Spring Park exists as a curated place. So there's an actually pretty accurate map of Cold Spring Park. We can see there are 476 species in Cold Spring Park. Let's say I just want to see plants. I could type here, plants. And now I'm just looking at the plants in Cold Spring Park, 218 species. I can also do all sorts of filters. So let's say that I'm interested in, I can do months, which is really interesting. So like, let's say I want to see all the birds that are seen in September, because I want to go and do a bird survey. I can go to September and I can select birds, update search. And now I'm looking at the birds in Cold Spring Park. You can also, let's say I wanted to, this isn't really my house, but let's say I wanted to look, I can also draw a square and I can redo the search within a square. I can move this square. You can pretty much search any place that you want, and it'll recalculate the species that are there. So like, let's say we're concerned about invasive species. So I'm going to type in porcelainberry, which is an emerging invasive coming up from the south. And I'm going to do Newton, Massachusetts. Okay, so now I can see porcelainberry, and if more of us were out looking for this plant, it could help Catherine Howard and her team to identify areas where we need to treat. So I'm going to do something now. I'm going to demonstrate, hopefully. I'm going to come to this one. And this is my observation. So I'm going to write a note to Catherine to show you how you do this at KH. She's our invasives coordinator. I think this is her. Please check this site out for possible treatment. Now she's been tagged and we'll get a notification. So that's a way that we can potentially use iNaturalist more in our community. So now I'm gonna go up and look a little bit at my observations. You'll have your observations. This is zooming automatically to all of my observations. I can, again, filter that. So here are some of my recent, here's something I was doing today. You can explore your observations. You can filter your observations. Look at their status. This one's been identified.
We have a quick question about that. This is
Yep.
Beth.
Yep.
Do your observations, we've been asked, have to be research grade before they show up on your content list?
No. So let me go back. Great question. So if I go to my grid, so this one is not research. This one is research grade. See, so it'll tell you which are research grade and which are not. And you could actually filter if you wanted to. You could filter your observations and just look at research grade. But no, they'll all show up. And everyone else in the community can see them all also, unless you hide them.
Great.
So now I'm going to just go to identify. I'm not going to demo this here because I'll show it on the phone. Now I'm exploring, so I could just, let's say I just want to, well, maybe, so I'm going to just filter this to Newton. So then I can go through here, and let's say there's something that I think I know what it is. I can click on it. Here's something that Ted from Newton Conservators posted. So I can make someone else help him identify this. I could agree, or I could ask the app to make suggestions for me. So this is based on the computer algorithm. It's making suggestions. It's giving me photos to compare. So we'll do more of that on the phone, but I just wanted to show you that here. So the last thing I want to show on the website, and then we're going to jump into the phone, is projects. So under community, you can search all the projects in iNaturalist. The ones that I've used recently pop up here. Actually, the one I want, I'm going to search because I want the Newton. We set up an umbrella project that has all these conservation areas in Newton. And so then each site has data. So like, for example, this right now is the Dolan Pond site. And you can see it gives some statistics at the beginning, who's done the most observations, the most species. Then there are some statistics down here. So like we just talked about research grade and things that need ID. Here's a map. And you can then filter these observations by taxon. We also have a project that kind of lists all the open spaces in Newton that we can use to get to the other to these other sub-sites.
Okay, I have a question, which is, for example, do you have to choose the project at the time you make the observation? Because I have a ton of observations I've made just being in open spaces, but they weren't made being part of a project.
That's a terrific question. That's great. I'm glad someone met. So no. And the answer to that question is no. So any observation will automatically that someone makes on one of these properties will automatically be included. However, if you, I'm going to show this later on the phone, because of privacy reasons, iNaturalist gives you the option to obscure your observations, to not show the exact location. Let's say you don't want someone knowing where you live or whatever. So if you've obscured your location, the only way that us, the Newton Conservators, would be able to include it, to know about it as part of the project that's actually in these sites, is you'd have to join. But if you're not obscuring, and most people aren't typically obscuring their observations, it'll be automatically entered. So real quick here, this is our sort of master umbrella project. These are the conservation areas we've already included, and you can then link to the individual ones. I already showed you one of them, and we can get more elaborate, more detailed statistics about Newton open spaces here. So for example, 23% of what's been observed on those open spaces is insects. We're going to want to work on this. For example, we're going to want to get more and more of these as research grade if we can get more people that are experts helping to identifications. So that's the project. I'm going to now jump to the phone demonstration. If anyone has any questions while I'm doing that, feel free to type them in the chat.
Can you tell us how do we join the project? What do we do to actually become a member of the project?
So search in the lower, go to community projects, and then we're searching up here, but you actually want to search here, and then you can type in Newton Parks, and it will come up. And then you can click at the over here to join.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So let me now share my PowerPoint. Okay. So unfortunately, the Android and the iPhone are fairly different. So, but this is important because most of the time people are out in the field using on the phone. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a tutorial on both. So this is the Android starting with Explore, and all of the menu for Android is this right over here, these 3 bars. So if I click on Explore, so if I click on those 3 bars, then I can choose Explore. We're going to look at that first. And then as on the website, I can look in things in a grid, which is what I'm looking at now, or I can select the map, the yellow. So now I'm looking at a map, and I was in the Berkshires past few days. So it automatically brought me to where I was, and there's a lot of observations. So now I can zoom in with my fingers. I zoom in, and then I can search the map area. It's going to give me this choice to search the map area, and then it's going to recalculate my statistics. So this is now telling me how many species are in the area on my screen, the map area.
We have a question from someone who wants to confirm that everything you do on the phone transfers to the website, and the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. Yeah, 100%. So I'm just going to point you to these 2 arrows at the bottom right. One of them on Android will bring you to your location. Let's say you scroll to go look somewhere else. You can always come back to your location, and then you can also change the background to an aerial photograph right here. Now we're looking at an iPhone Explorer. So on the iPhone, there's no 3 bars. All the menu choices are down at the bottom. We're going to select Explore. And then, as I said before, you can look at it on a grid or a map, a list. Here's a list, or a grid, or a map. So that's again in Linux. And then you can zoom in and out with your fingers to sort of it'll automatically recalculate the list. On the iPhone, it doesn't give you statistics. It doesn't, but it will recalculate the list based on where you are. So now we're going to explore location, right? Kind of like I did on the website. You might want to zoom to Dolan Pond or wherever. So you can use the search tool up there. And then there's map area. You can select map area, and you can start typing under map area, or it saves things that I had looked at, you, the user, had looked at. So I could type in Webster Woods, and it'll start to give me things that have similar names, or I can pull from my saved menu. So here I'm exploring Newton on my phone. I typed in Newton, Mass. it's different on the iPhone. So there's just one search window on the iPhone. You're going to be typing in there. You start to type, and then it's going to ask you, are you typing an organism? Are you looking for a person? Are you looking for a location? Are you looking for a project? So there's just one search window. So in this case, I'm going to select, I'm looking for a location. If I type in the whole name, it's going to give me fewer choices. But then it's going to have a window. Then I can select the location I'm interested in. So now I selected Kennard Park in Newton, Mass, and then it's going to give me that. Android has a much more extensive filtering choices. I'm going to show that in a minute, but the way you can do more than one filter at the same time on the iPhone is so I already filtered, say, to Newton. Now I can start typing in bees, for example. If I type in bees, it'll then give me, and then I say organisms named bees, it'll then give me all the bees in Newton. On the Android, I have a full filter window that I also have on the website, so I can filter by many more things. So I can filter, for example, like I could select all the bees that have been seen in September and October, because I'm getting ready to go do a survey at Webster Woods, for example. I can set specific dates, and then I can apply those filters. And it tells me what I'm searching for. So here I filtered to insects, any grade, whether they've been researched or not, and then in September. So these are all the insects in September of any year in Newton. New observation. So you're going to be using, so by the way, you can always click up here where my Naturalist 2000 there is, and that'll give me back to my observations. Down here on the main menu, you click new observation. Okay, so this is important. You can take a photo through the app. That's probably the most frequently used. You can also choose an image from your image library, either on your computer or on your phone. You've taken a picture before. You can have no media, which means that it's very limited, like no one else is going to see your observation. But let's say I just want to keep a bird list of my property, and it's really hard to photograph the birds. I could just enter something without any evidence. Sounds are really useful for example, for calling frogs, calling amphibians. Birds actually are easier in some cases, unless you're a really good photographer. So you can make a recording through the app, or you can choose a sound file on your device. We're going to take a picture here. And it brought me to my camera. I took the picture. The picture you can see at the top here in a little thumbnail. Now it automatically generated my location. And it tells me how accurate it is. I'm going to mention this at the end, but if you want to give the app time, it's going to be sort of averaging your location. You want to give it time, give a fairly accurate location, because we want to know that something is in Cold Spring Park, for example, and not 300 meters away. So if you go too quickly to take a second photo, for example, it won't be as accurate. This is the visibility. So like you might want to obscure your location for privacy reasons. You would select that here, and there are 3 choices. By the way, iNaturalist works with the state, so our endangered species, every state. So our endangered species program, iNaturalist automatically obscures certain rare species that we think are at risk of being collected. So even if you don't obscure the location of, say, a wood turtle, iNaturalist will automatically obscure the location of the wood turtle.
Question: if someone is out without a smartphone, so there isn't data that recorded as to what their location was. Let's say they have a camera, whatever, and they go back later. Are they able to enter an observation, or are they not able to, given that they don't have the location?
Oh, that's another really great question. So modern digital cameras on your phone, and I think I'm not sure about all digital cameras. Some cameras capture the GPS coordinates. iNaturalist the latitude and longitude. iNaturalist, if you import a picture, so like you didn't bring your phone, but you took a picture on a device that captures the location, the photo, it will import the locational information from the photo. Now, sometimes it's not as accurate. So that's one option. You can also manually enter the location. So if you know where you are, you can go in. I'm not going to have time to go over that, but you can select on the map by hand, basically, where it was. So the answer is yes, you can enter observations without having your phone out in the field.
Terrific.
It's going to ask you to enter an identification. If you click in this box, it's going to generate suggestions, typically. So here are the suggestions on the far right side. And in this case, the app is fairly confident to the genus. So you're going to probably want to select one of these. It's not always correct, by the way. So often it's better maybe to select the thing that's more general. So maybe you should select the genus unless you're particularly familiar with the species. And then that's what we did here is we selected that genus, and then we're going to select the checkbox, and then that's going to load the observation into iNaturalist. So then I can go see so now that it's been loaded into my portfolio of observations, if I click on myself, it comes up at the top. So this is the list of all my observations. After I selected the checkbox, this one is now at the top. It's my most recent observation. On the iPhone, you're going to go back down to the bottom. Everything's on the bottom. You're going to select, in this case, camera, but you have the same choices that we talked about for the Android. Oh, these are the different colors. So those are different taxonomic groups. I don't remember, like one color is plants, one color is birds, one color is reptiles. I believe that's what those are. Okay, so you're going to select camera. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to enter a picture. Now here, I took a picture of the leaf because I'm going to come back to this later, but you really ideally want to take more than one picture. For goldenrods, actually the leaf vein pattern is often important for identification. So we can talk more about that later, but you want to get several different pictures. It'll help other folks identify things with you. And then this also has the accuracy location, and you can set the your geo privacy, as we talked about before. When you're done, instead of a checkbox, you're going to hit the share button on the bottom. Well, you're going to enter what you can actually share it without entering what it is for various reasons. It'll just come up as unknown. That's not the best idea. I'll come back to that at the end. So first, before you hit share at the bottom, you're going to do the same thing. It's going to make suggestions. In this case, unless you're familiar with the goldenrods or have keyed this out elsewhere, you might want to select the genus. It's selected, and then you're going to hit share. And it's going to show up. This is my wife's phone. She doesn't have so many observations, but it's going to show up at the top of your list of observations. This is another menu item. So we've got Explore. We can look at everyone's observations. We can new observations into the bottom. We can look at our own activity. Okay, so activity. So what this is this is my content. So this gives me an update. Someone helped me identify these bumblebees, make them into research grade. That's about my activity. But now I can also be following things. So this is actually really interesting. So if I give an identification to someone else's observation, I'll automatically be following that observation. And when other people identify it, I'm going to get updated. So maybe someone disagrees with me. I'm going to see that here, and then I'm going to potentially learn, or I might even go back in and make a comment. I can also, there's an observation that I see, and I'm not confident what it is, but I'm really curious what it is. It's someone else's observation. I can tag it to follow it. So on the iPhone, I didn't make a whole thing here, but the way you see the activity is, again, everything's down at the bottom. So coming back to how I can follow someone else's observation, there are these three dots here. So I went into someone else's observation, and I'm going to use these three dots, and then I'm going to say follow this observation. And this is really great because like if there's some bee that I'm really curious about, but I don't know what it is, it'll then flag me when someone else identifies it. Now, you can do this on the computer and the Android. I couldn't find it on the iPhone. Okay, so now we're in someone else's observation. I'm on an Android, and I'm going to help identify it. So there are these two different tabs here. This is information tab showing me the location. So I need to go to this comment tab. And now I'm going to click suggest ID. I could agree here. I'm going to click suggest ID. It's going to give me suggestions just like on the computer. Now here on the Android, not on the iPhone, I have this thing where I can do a comparison. So like, let's say I think it's this, but I want to do a comparison. I can click those arrows, and now it's going to beautifully line up the photos. These are the photos of the observer, and it would, if there were multiple photos, it would let me scroll through them. And then here are the photos that iNaturalist has. It's going to let me compare, which is a really great feature before I decide if I'm going to make a suggestion. So let's say I want to make a suggestion. I would select it basically. No, sorry, I'm in the iPhone. So now, once I was confident, I would then select that. There's like a checkbox, and I would then my identification would go into that person's observation. Now I'm in the iPhone. It's the same thing. You need to get into the comment field, and then if you click on suggest ID, it'll give you the suggestions. So again, like as far as I can tell, there's no way to do the side-by-side comparison of the photos. But if you click on one of these suggestions, it's going to give you information. Other screens can open on your iPhone, and it will give you a whole bunch of photos up here. And I don't know if you can see my pointer, but I'm in the upper right. There's a whole bunch of photos and other information, the range map. I can use this before I decide if I'm going to enter an identification. So with that, I threw an awful lot of information at you pretty fast. I have a few tips. I want to close the formal part of the presentation, then we'll open up to Q&A. So when you're doing an observation, you could just put your photos in and that's it, and you're done, and it'll just come up as unknown. But then fewer people are going to look at it because there's some people who are really interested in plants, and they're going to filter just to plants in Massachusetts, and they're just going to look at the plant observation. So try to put something down, even if you don't know what it is. You can put it at like the level of the genus or the family, for example, or plant or bee. Photos. This is really important. Multiple photos from different angles, different zooms. If you know something about what's likely to be diagnostic features, you want to try and photograph them. So for example, like a close-up of a leaf, or maybe even in some cases, a close-up of the leaf underside and the top, because sometimes the underside has hairs. Or maybe you want to get a close-up of a branch. Like you can't necessarily put 10 photos in, but you want to put a few photos. It increases the odds of identification. Or for example, like asters, a close-up of the flower might be helpful. I could go on and on. Like sometimes it's where the stem clasps where the leaf clasps the stem. You're not going to be able to do everything, but as you get more familiar, regardless, put a few in.
I was intrigued from when you talked about you could put a sound in. Can iNaturalist ID sounds?
Oh yeah. No, so the computer algorithms don't cover that. So I have a suggestion. Merlin for bird. There are other apps that might be able to help. No, unfortunately, no. You're not going to get any suggestions.
Okay. That's what I've been thinking of, like katydids and crickets. I thought there needs to be an app somewhere that I can have play the sound and have it tell me what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So you could search on the web. I'm kind of curious. Like, I think we're having Matt Pelican. Aren't we having Matt Pelican give a speech? So
we are, and it's on my list of questions for him.
So he's pretty active in iNaturalist. So like, I suspect like if you put a sound recording in and you say that it's Orthoptera, or you say it's crickets or grasshoppers or katydids, he might listen to it. You know, like there are experts out there that might listen, you know, they might listen to your tape, even though even though you're not going to be able to make much of a suggestion. The last bullet under photos, photo resolution, at least on my phone, it's much better when I'm using the phone camera directly. So it doesn't really matter maybe for a plant, you know, like a big or not a close-up. But like if I'm taking close-up photos of insects, I will not use the app directly. I only use my camera, my device camera, because it's much better. It adds some complication with the geo-referencing, but I used to take all my photos through the app, and now I've switched over a lot. Location matters a lot. Sometimes people don't think so much about it, but you want to wait for the app to capture your location well. Like I said before, if you start taking a second photo too soon, you'll see it kind of recalculating, generating, and showing you how many meters it is, and you want it under 10 meters. And then you can check the location and you can edit it if it's off. Like, let's say you don't do that and you notice when you get home that there's a 2-kilometer bubble around your observation from Webster Woods, but you know where you are. You can go in and manually edit that. And then be careful. It'll adopt the location from the photos on your camera, but sometimes those aren't as accurate, depending on how long you've been standing in a certain place taking pictures, but just to bear that in mind.
I also think it helps people to know that you don't have to go into this level of detail at the beginning if you're just starting to use the app, right? Because there was a long time I just went in and grabbed photos and asked the app what they thought it was, and then got feedback from people later, and I didn't worry about how far I was away. I mean, all of that's important for your long-term project, but for people who are sort of overwhelmed at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I threw a lot of information. You could just go in there, take a picture or 2 or 3, and then not even bother with the making a suggested identification. You know, just put it in as unknown. Or you can take it one step further. You can do it however you want. I mean, and that's really valuable. And you're right, like it's going to capture some kind of location, so it's not critical. But yeah, hopefully I didn't overwhelm people too much here.
No, you've been great. This is awesome.
Okay, so I'm almost done. Oh yeah, so this gets at Beth's question about the sound to some extent. So, and this is way too advanced for a lot of people, which is fine. But you might want to combine. It's really powerful if you combine iNaturalist with other tools. So, for example, if you're going to record birds in the forest, if you also have Merlin on your phone, which uses sound to identify birds. So let's say I'm recording a wood thrush. I don't know it's a wood thrush. If I'm using Merlin, it's going to tell me, oh, that's a wood thrush. So then when I post it on iNaturalist, I can type in wood thrush, for example. There's other tools I'm not going to get into for insects. I think GoBotany is a phenomenal resource. And again, this is more advanced, but let's say iNaturalist tells you that something is a thistle. You know, it just tells you the genus. That's fine. That's great. Just put it in as the genus. Maybe someone else will identify it. But if you want to delve deeper, you can type that genus into GoBotany, and it'll give you all kinds of tools to help you do further, and keys to help you do further identification. So with that, thank you so much. Again, I hope I didn't go too fast or say too much, but please use iNaturalist everywhere, and including in Newton. We talked about some of the applications, and then join us at a Bioblitz, which is where we're going to be using iNaturalist to do some surveys of our open spaces.
Thank you, John. That was really helpful. I have a question. When I put up my observation, and this is just a conversational, I feel awkward. You know, when you're in a community and you don't know all the norms, and someone comes back and says, I disagree with your observation. It really is this. And then I go to look it up and I say, oh yeah, they're right. It is that. Do I then hit agree? Do I just let it stand? Do I change my observation? What is the norm for that conversation?
That's a great question. Sometimes I'll throw something in and I'm not 100% sure. So like I tend to kind of go up to genus or family, but sometimes I'll throw something in because I want to stimulate someone. So sometimes if it's like a real expert, and I'm sure they're right, sometimes there's an option to withdraw. So sometimes I'll withdraw my identification, but sometimes I'll just leave it, and then or sometimes I'll agree. Like I'm not sure it's the right thing, but I tend to, like, if I'm really confident I made a mistake, I'll tend to withdraw it. But if there's any doubt, like, why not let the community sort it out? So then I would leave it.
Okay. That sounds great. When you talked about if it's someone who you really know is an expert and you believe them, so that's one of my questions. Anyone can weigh in, right? They don't have to be an expert. And so it gets sort of overwhelming knowing how much you rely on what you're getting back. Is it mainly experts who tend to weigh in and give you answers?
I mean, I think there's probably a pretty wide range of experts, right? Like there's some people like there are world renowned, like, there's this guy, John Asher, that's doing bees, who's like a world renowned expert. And then there are other people who are like really good, let's say amphibian naturalists, like locally. And then there are people who are a little less. What I do think is there's a culture, like a real casual user is relatively unlikely to just start randomly like putting in so it's sort of like self-police. Anyone could do it, and it could be someone who knows nothing, but I think more frequently it's going to be someone who has some idea what they're doing. But I do agree with you that there's a wide range of skill levels.
And it goes back to what you said at the beginning about it being a respectful and collegial community, and that probably has some self-policing.
Yeah. I think I certainly think twice. Like I want to have a pretty good level of confidence before I'm going to identify someone else's.
We have a question whether it's important to show a hand or a foot in the photo so it's clearer what the scale is.
Sometimes I'll put, it depends. Like actually, I was using a ruler for some grass seeds. That's a really good point. You don't do it every time, but if it's something that you suspect the size really matters, if you can put a reference point, something like sometimes I've used coins or a hand.
But if you need a real close up, like an insect, then that's not going to work.
Yeah. So you can actually still use something like a ruler or even a coin, because like you're usually not getting that close up. The cameras usually don't focus that close.
Okay.
So, just use your judgment, but sometimes it can help.
Okay. We have another question from Pat, who's given us some excellent questions. And she's saying, is GoBotany a phone app?
That's a really good question. Also, it's not a phone app, but it's web responsive. Like the website works well on a phone, and so it's not an app. You can just go directly to the website. But I use the dichotomous key a lot, and it reconfigures itself so that it's relatively easy to use on a phone.
It's a site that was started by Native Plant Trust and is run by Native Plant Trust. And it's amazing.
I keep forgetting because they changed it. Right. It used to be New England Wildflower. Now it's called Native Plant Trust. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, I mean, I have a book this big, this fat that they made into this app, and it's much more user friendly. If you're using the book, you have to keep going to the back to the glossary, but it gives you you just hover over a word and it defines it for you. It's a great thing, but it's not an app. It's a website.
Okay. And I usually send out a message, a letter for those of you who are regulars the day after, and I will put that, and I'll put Merlin and anything else you tell us, John, I will put in that letter tomorrow. Just to keep things in perspective, we have an attendee who says, I have a friend who took an observation of some kind of a June bug close up on the sidewalk, and iNaturalist suggested it was a wild boar. Okay, well.
Yeah, I mean, the species level identifications are hit or miss. Like sometimes they're amazing, but sometimes they're not. And again, like that's why sometimes I'll just put in the genus or the family. But it's definitely giving you leads. And it really just depends on the quality of the photo and how many observations in the system for a specific species.
Okay, another question. Can one request an additional census ID for a particular observation? So if you want to move something up to a research grade, can you say, hey, someone else? That's a great question. I was just looking back through my list in preparation for this, and I thought, wait, there was some way back at the beginning that no one ever responded to. So can you do that? Can you say?
So it's tricky. You could, if you know someone, you could tag that person and say, can you take a look at it? One trick that I've used is, I've found some old observations and I've gone back and reordered the photos or cropped the photos. And then it refreshes the observation. And I feel like it kind of puts it higher in the queue. I feel like by chance, like people are more likely to look at it than a 2-year-old observation because it's been updated. So that's sort of a workaround. But other than that, you'd have to tag an individual.
Okay. You may be hearing from lots of us. So when these observations are rated research grade, who are the people using the research?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I would, first of all, like when we try to do our inventory, where we are going to put a relatively consistent effort over time into all these different areas, it's going to matter. Like, we're going to take the research grade as being more reliable for, say, Cold Spring Park or wherever site that we're surveying than the other observations. And then also, like, I know where Mass Wildlife is thinking of starting a statewide reptile survey where it's a little bit more organized. I'm not going to go into all the details, but still using iNaturalist. And that's an example where we would make a real effort to get a whole bunch of experts lined up to do identifications. And then we are going to rely on the research grade observations, not the others. So there are researchers that use it, but yeah, it has to be taken with a grain of salt to some extent for the reasons you said, right? Like it's better than nothing, but just because 2 people agree doesn't mean it's correct.
I know I sometimes get a notice saying that someone who has a website of, I don't know, some sort of mosquito has taken my photo and has included it on their site. So I guess that could be a way of someone doing a survey.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely researchers that use it because, like, for example, there's there's a project related to birds that are dead. and I've gotten notices that has been added to those, the dead bird, because people are interested in their emerging diseases or whatever.
Yeah.
Another example is I think it's in Vermont, like some of my bee observations, someone has gone back in and identified the flowers that the bees, I think there's a project where they're matching the bees to the flowers. Someone's gone back in and tagged some of my observations with the species that the bee is on, the plant species the bee is on. So people are definitely using it.
So that's really interesting because that really brings out the dual nature. Part of it is this is what you said in the beginning, but this really brought it home to me. Part of it is you're looking to get information for yourself, and part of it is that you're sharing. Because, for example, this is West Nile virus season, right? I always lose blue jays in my yard. I've just lost 2. So I didn't take photos of the 2 dead blue jays. One I did, because I know that's happening. But it's never dawned on me that it would be a good thing to do, because my yard versus an open space, I saw one in the Newton Center playground. There was an enormous dead crow with no sign of anything other than it was dead. So my guess is, given that it was a corvid, I'm sort of getting off on a tangent, sorry, but given that it's this series,
Yeah.
that might be interesting information for somebody. So even sometimes when we know well what something is, it's not a bad idea to document it and share it.
I think so. Like that's why I like to document some of the more common things as well. And over time, there's so many people using it, it becomes a powerful data set. So for example, like when I was down in New Jersey, I had a southern flower fly there's only a handful of observations in the New York area. But over time, with climate change, like we might start to see these things expand when you're reporting. In that case, it's something rare, but they're more like vultures is another example. They're moving, the black vultures, they're moving north. So even if they're becoming more common, it might be worth documenting them.
Terrific. Well, we're running late, but we have another question here.
Yeah.
It says, to be research grade, an observation must have at least 3 responses, 2 of which agree. How frequently do you get more or less than that? How frequently is a non-research grade just because not enough people have responded?
It's hard for me to really quantify. So first of all, it only needs 2. Well, it depends. If I put a species level identification in myself,
okay,
and then a second person does, that's 2. That can become research grade. But if I don't know what it is, so I only put in the genus, then yeah, you're right. In that sense, there are 3. It depends a lot on the taxonomic group. So, and it depends on the geography. Like there's some people who I think were graduate students at Tufts who have moved on that were doing bees. And I think there are fewer people. That's my anecdotal observation on bees. Plants can be kind of frustrating. There aren't so many people doing plants. I have found as many as I would like, but flower flies, the syrphid flies, instantaneously, like it's the same 2 or 3 people that are, I think, doing it across half the country, or I don't even know. And they're real experts, and they will identify your flower flies within 24 hours. I can almost guarantee you. So it just depends. It depends a lot.
Terrific. Well, thank you. This was just amazing. If while you're digesting all of this, attendees, you come up with questions, you can submit them to Jon through webinars@newtonconservators.org, and I will make sure they get to him. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Most of all, thank you, Jon, for fascinating information. And good night, everyone. Hope to see you next time.